Hey, how's it going? I'm gonna try to make another quick video. We'll see, I say that every time. And I'm just gonna wing it, like I say every time. Um, this is an economic thing, and it has to do with the impact that the semiconductor shortage, um, and how there is a semiconductor shortage. And I'm gonna explain why, what the effects are in this economy and in the world, and why it's just generally happening. Now, this is a quote that I'd like to thank Thomas Sowell for. It's what is economics really? Economics is the allocation of scarce resources that have alternative uses. Now, to break that down a little bit further, allocate pretty much means to set aside for a specific purpose. Um, Scarce is the scarcity of something, which is pretty much everything has a scarce value, and it means that everything is finite in the amount of resources that we have to pretty much do anything. Even when they say unlimited resources, there's an amount that exists. And now to take those resources, all resources have alternate uses. There's many ways to use anything. And to clarify that again, I'll say it, is economics is the allocation of scarce resources which have alternative uses. So now that we got that out of the way, let's address the situation that we're seeing in the world. One of the biggest things, especially if you're a computer or technology enthusiast, you're going to notice that GPUs, graphics processing units, are one of the biggest indicators that we're having, or one of the most obvious indicators that we're having a semiconductor shortage. Now, the reason I want to tackle this is because there seems to be so much confusion going on, and the semiconductor shortage is something that I said was probably going to happen, and I mentioned that about 2 years ago. The reason I was able to see that was because of economics and the allocation of scarce resources that have alternative uses. And I want to emphasize that. Now, one of the things that we're seeing, and is a misconception, is to why we see a GPU shortage. What we're seeing right now is the graphics processing units that are sold to put into computers in order for people to play video games. However, one of the alternate uses that that resource has is also in the function of mining and blockchaining. This has to do with crypto. When people mine crypto, pretty much all sorts of crypto, Ethereum, Bitcoin, and a lot of other big coin names, because most of them are actually derivatives of Ethereum, Bitcoin, etc. So those scarce resources, which are Ethereum, we'll take namely because that's the chief one that has alternative uses, is the mining and turning into other coins. And blockchaining, which pretty much is the coding and decoding of these coins in order to confirm the transactions. Now, a lot of people assume one of the reasons, it is one of the reasons, but the reason we're seeing such a hike and shortage of GPUs is because everyone's buying them up for mining coins. However, that's not exactly true. What we're seeing is a lot of people buying up these GPUs to use for mining. However, that would just make the demand surge and companies produce a lot more, which would bring the revenue in. However, we're not seeing that. What we're really seeing is that we have a shortage of semiconductors, and semiconductors are used in the production of electronics and CPUs, and the CPUs are embedded within the GPUs, any processing units, and pretty much any electronics that we see today. Semiconductor is pretty much a transistor, and we've been using those ever since, I would say, 1947, but that's when they started being manufactured. So really from 1948 and on. And one of the reasons this is so important is because the allocated materials used have alternative uses, But what I really want to get at is these are rare earth materials. So there's a high scarcity rate among the materials that make up these resistors, transistors, and semiconductors. And without those, you can't make CPUs, which in turn make the GPUs. And there's multiple reasons why we're seeing this. And this doesn't only affect GPUs, this affects CPUs, but pretty much any major electronics we see or use today. And that's really important because it's one of the reasons why we're seeing electronics go up in value, especially when it comes to GPUs. That's why I use that as an example, because the GPUs right now, you see them skyrocket. Some of these cards will go for, you know, $150, $200, $300, and they're selling for well over $1,000. The reason why that's happening is because how scarce these materials are and how they need to be allocated. And how they're being allocated is for the use in mining coins and for graphics processing units for computers for gaming. And one of the reasons we're seeing that is because since COVID, there have been so many gamers at home, and there's a lot of people that have been getting into mining coins. And that's one of the reasons why we're seeing energy consumption be a problem, because of how many GPUs are being used and how much energy they use and how much electricity they're allocating. I'm using these words on purpose because it's going to start to make sense how this all plays into economics, if it hasn't already started making sense. Now, the real reason that we're seeing GPUs go up is, like I mentioned before, the rare earth materials. And to take this a step further, I have to explain how and where these are produced. Now, the vast majority of semiconductors and CPUs and GPUs are made almost exclusively in Taiwan. And one of the reasons is because they have a lot of these resources, and it's cheaper to send them to a place or to have them manufactured far away and then sent to whatever country it is, who then put these GPUs together using their own parts, which a lot of parts are also made in China. Now, one thing we've been seeing since 2013 is the Belt and Road Initiative, which I had covered in previous videos. And this is and I'm probably going to put that at the end of the video so you guys can go check it out. And that'll further explain this whole thing and really make a lot more sense too, if you're still having difficulty following along. If you're following along, then that's awesome. And so what's happening right now is the Belt and Road Initiative was an initiative put on by the Chinese government in order to expand their economic growth. And how they do this is by expanding their reach across the globe to get their hands on all different types of materials. And what they do is, in order to get these materials, they will then sell them on the market, and they will hoard them in order to keep their value high. And what's happening is they're going into other countries with contracts, and they're giving a lot of these countries loans. And what happens is the Chinese government grants these countries loans in order to further push the Belt and Road Initiative. But instead of giving them grants to expand on this, what they're doing is they're giving loans, and so now they become in debt to China. A lot of companies and countries have seen this, and so they're trying to back out. But there's a lot of countries now that are in debt to China. And what happened was, with this overreach and this growth of the economy that we see China is they've been having their basically a monopoly on most of these rare earth materials that have been allocated to the Chinese government, and now their scarcity lie with them, which means they pretty much have control and monopoly on these rare earth materials. And what we're seeing right now is tension and probably war right around the corner between Taiwan and China, because Taiwan wants their own sovereignty. China wants that country, and China has denied them entry into joining the United Nations. And so the United Nations doesn't see them truly as their own country, um, more of just a sovereign nation, which is still under loose control by China. It's kind of a complicated subject, and I go much further into that into the video that I'll post after this, which is the same video I mentioned before at the Belt and Road Initiative. And what's happening is China now has control of all these rare earth materials, and they also now have and are trying to gain control, more control over Taiwan, which means that not only do they have their hand on the materials to make these semiconductors, but now they have their hands on the fabrication units that make these semiconductors. A few other countries have these fabs. One of them, I believe, is India, and there's a couple other. And right now, I said we should have done this earlier, but right now, America is looking into having some of these fabrication units and company manufacturing plants based in America now. But it's going to be hard, even if we do that, because we won't have our hands on those rare earth materials. And what's happening right now, because of this, because of the tension that we see, because of the breakdown of the Belt and Road Initiative, because of the breakdown of all these contracts, and because of how difficult it is to get these units fabricated and for other countries to get their hands on these allocated resources that make these units, it's becoming increasingly difficult in order to manufacture them. And one of the reasons why China wants a stranglehold over it is because they know the value. And so what they've been doing, besides not only monopolizing on the rare earth materials, but they have also been hoarding all these chips. And this is one of the dangers that we see in the growing economy that is the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, or the Republic of China, you could even say, is that now they have a stranglehold, and their economy is also taking dips and dives, and they're using that as an advantage. And so it's becoming increasingly more and more difficult for other countries to get their hands on any of these resources, and it's becoming more and more costly for the Chinese government to even have these manufactured and produced. And so now what we're seeing is a huge shortage of these semiconductors, and it's preventing us and other countries from manufacturing CPUs, which are also found in GPUs, but are also found in all other electronics and consumer products, including electronic cars and vehicles and planes and engines and basically almost everything that's produced today. And this is what's driving up all the prices. This is what's becoming very, very difficult for companies to get a hold of, and this is what's slowing down manufacturing. And not only on top of that, but COVID also plays a huge role in this too, because now in the past 2 years we've seen manufacturing across the entire global board go down because of the amount of allocating the resources known as human workers. And this is very important to take into consideration and to think about on a larger scale. And it's a very big problem. Something else too is it's becoming harder to manufacture, or it's going to be difficult to get, even if we get past this semiconductor shortage. Another hurdle that we have to cross when it comes to semiconductors is manufacturing them smaller and smaller. Now, the more companies that compete, the less expensive they become, and the more abundant they become. The more they are monopolized, the more expensive they become, because it's harder for companies to compete, and therefore all the resources are allocated into a small general area, which can now be price controlled. Price controlling is one of the most detrimental things you can do to the market. I'll get into that in a separate video. But it's a very real thing, and also Moore's Law is something that we also need to take into consideration, because very soon, probably within a few years, even if we do get past the semiconductor shortage, we're going to start noticing the processing units becoming larger and larger, because we've reached the apex in which we can make them on nanometer scales. We're probably going to reach somewhere like a 2 nanometer scale, which a few companies have been working on, but they can't get manufactured if we don't have the resources to do so. Now, I just kind of wanted to get that out there and sum up the whole situation that's been going on, why I've been able to see this come from so far away, and to clarify why we're seeing, especially for a lot of the gamers out there and PC builders like I am, really want to clarify the reasons why we're having such a shortage in the first place, why it's such a problem, and why we're seeing the prices of it all go up. On top of everything else that's been happening, like inflation, the amount of workers there are, how COVID had impacted everything. So we're seeing everything kind of collide, and all these problems collide, and that's why you're seeing such a difficult time trying to find the GPUs. You know, GPU cards that were just a few $100 are now ranging in, you know, a thousand or a few $1,000s now, even some of the older ones. And I wouldn't advise people to hold on to them and grab them and try to sell them, because eventually you're not going to be able to sell them because of how expensive they are, and they just won't be worth it for people to buy. So there is a point at which it becomes a burden to those people that are collecting and selling. So I just wanted to clarify that. Spread this around to anyone that you know who's having a difficult time finding GPUs, or understanding what's happening and going on here. And that's why you see a couple companies like NVIDIA that are trying to make separate cards right now too. NVIDIA is coming out with these new cards that have hash stoppers on them, pretty much, which is going to make it hard or artificially impossible to mine with them. So they're going to be just for gaming. However, can still have a negative impact. So we're going to see the quality of cards kind of go down for a little bit too, as new technology comes out. So it's going to be a very, very, very interesting balance game that's happening right now. And I didn't really see too many people really clarify this whole topic. And it seems like a lot of people that do the, you know, computer news and stuff like that, it's kind of went over their head too, because this incorporates economics into the whole thing too, and it's going to be really hard to understand if you're not into economics, which is a very niche kind of thing. So I just wanted to throw that out there, clarify things up a bit, and think it's important to know. And these are the real reasons why you're seeing electronic consumer prices, including GPUs, skyrocket, and CPUs, and why companies are having a shortage and why it's harder and harder to get them. That's the reason. So just to let you know. So enjoy, have a great day, subscribe and like, share this around, and I really appreciate your time. Take care.